to the Fulbright-Hayes and Title VI Showcase. My name is Corey Neal. I'm the Program Manager of the Fulbright-Hayes Group Projects Abroad program at the U.S. Department of Education, Office of International and Foreign Language Education. We are very proud of the achievements of the alumni of our past programs and look forward to continued success of the Fulbright-Hayes overseas programs and the Title VI domestic programs we administer. Today we are excited to hear from past participants of the Fulbright-Hayes Group Projects Abroad program, as well as alumni of our Title VI Foreign Language and Area Studies program. The Group Projects Abroad, or GPA program, provides grants to support overseas projects in training, research, and curriculum development in modern foreign languages for teachers, students, and faculty engaged in a common endeavor. GPA projects may include short-term seminars, curriculum development, group research, or advanced intensive language programs. The Foreign Language and Area Studies, or FLAS programs, provides fellowships to institutions of higher education to assist undergraduate students and graduate students undergoing training in modern foreign languages and related area or international studies. For over half a century, these programs have supported the development of U.S. human resource capacities vital for national security, economic competitiveness, and global engagement. Fulbright-Hayes and Title VI programs broaden access to international education and foreign languages and provide opportunities to strengthen teaching of less commonly taught languages, history, and culture at the K-12 level. These programs have also facilitated scholarly research on compelling global topics. We hope that this showcase will inspire you to learn more about these programs and to apply for our many grant opportunities that will offer international and foreign language education resources to U.S. schools, students, teachers, and faculty to broaden and deepen their cultural understanding. So welcome and enjoy our presentation as we hear from our distinguished guests.
Hi, and thank you for tuning in to the Office of International and Foreign Language Education's Language Learning Showcase. My name is Jessica Bach, and I'm a staff member here at the Office of International and Foreign Language Education at the U.S. Department of Education. This showcase features alumni panelists of both the Fulbright-Hayes Group Projects Abroad program and the Foreign Language and Area Studies program, who will discuss their experiences learning a less commonly taught language, or an LCTL. LCTL refers to languages other than English and the commonly taught European languages of German, French, and Spanish. The panelists here with us today will share how these programs have impacted both their professional and personal aspirations. Joining us today on this panel are Dr. Amaryllis Lugo de Fabritz, Dr. Kramer Gillen, and Ms. Ozma Khan. So let's start off by going around and kind of introducing ourselves. So starting with you, Amaryllis. So please introduce yourself, including which program you participated in, what country or countries you visited, the languages that you study, and then if you could tell us, what are you doing now?
Hi, so my name is Amaryllis Lugo de Fabritz, and I currently work as the Master Instructor of Russian at Howard University, which is a historically Black university located in Washington, D.C., and I participated in the Russian Language Area Studies program last summer of 2020. Technically in Russia, but it was, of course, the COVID summer. So it actually pivoted to a distance format, which, I'll have a chance to talk later about how interesting that was, not just as a participant, but also as a teacher of language. So yeah, and I participated as a Fulbright-Hayes fellow.
Great, thank you. Kramer, we can move on to you.
Sure. Yeah, my name is Kramer Gillen. I believe I was invited here because in 2011, I did the Fulbright-Hayes Group Projects Abroad program in Tajikistan, where I studied Dari and Tajik, which are two dialects or languages, depending on who you ask, of Persian. But I also did the Foreign Language Area Studies program 3 times after that. So I have a lot to be thankful for from you guys. So I'm a geographer, I'm a social science researcher, and I focus on issues of environmental governance and land and property. And I focus especially on people who make a living from livestock, pastoralists, and in Central Asia. And so On the non-academic side, I do some consulting for international development organizations on those topics. And then on the academic side, I'm actually not a doctor yet. I hope that doesn't get me uninvited. I'm a PhD student finishing up my dissertation at the University of Wisconsin in Madison, and my dissertation's about land tenure in central Tajikistan.
Great, thank you so much. Asma, we can move on to you.
Yeah, again, thank you so much for the warm welcome. My name is Asma. I'm a bit on the younger side. I recently graduated from Hopkins just this past May. And at Hopkins, I studied international studies, and the language I chose to pursue was Japanese. And I started this at a very young age in middle school, and I continued throughout high school and eventually in university as well. And during the summer between my junior and senior year, I was able to go to Japan on the FLAS scholarship. And I studied at the Inter-University Center for Japanese Language Studies located in Yokohama, Japan. And it was one of the best experiences I had in my entire life. Since graduating from Hopkins, I've been kind of juggling a bunch of different hats. I'm a private tutor. I tutor middle school students at actually my alma mater who are learning Japanese currently. I'm also an intern at for the JET Alumni Association, and I don't know if you're familiar with the JET program, but it's an organization that basically that takes service-minded graduates from the U.S. and basically sort of puts them in locations throughout Japan to teach English to Japanese students. And so I currently am in charge of sort of managing all social media platforms for the Alumni Association of that program. Lastly, I'm a volunteer for an organization called Korean American Divided Families, and this organization seeks to connect families that have been separated by the Korean War. So I'm doing advocacy work for that organization. I'm dealing with outreach. I'm communicating with these families. So I have a lot on my plate right now, and I'm really excited to be considered a panelist for today. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you all for those great introductions. It's really cool to hear all kind of the diversity of experiences that you all bring to the table. So that's great. The next question I want to pose to you all is, why did you choose to study a less commonly taught language? And how did that experience help support your research or your future career, or both perhaps? And Amaryllis, that first one is to you.
Hi. So I started studying Russian because I was at a high school in Massachusetts where we had an English teacher who taught half-time English and half-time Russian. And I was a sophomore in high school, and for real, they wouldn't let me take 2 math classes. So after that, I was like, okay, what am I going to take? I have a period and I don't want to study period because that's just, so I started looking and I saw Russian, and being Puerto Rican, I was born in Ponce, Puerto Rico. I was already very aware of the connection between Latin America and the Soviet Union. And I was very interested in international studies. So I was like, ooh, Russian, that sounds cool. Then I learned my first Pushkin poem and game over. That was it. I was hooked. I then got into Brown University, and the department there was amazing. So I guess as an instructor, takeaway number 1, take a less commonly taught language because you will never get lost. I walked in and the graduate students heard my Russian, because I had already had Russian for a couple of years. They're like, yeah, you're going to be a major. And when are you going to Russia? Like, of course, not thinking at all about, you realize what a heavy lift it is to persuade my Puerto Rican, Latin American traditionalist parents, like that I should go study in Leningrad. It was Leningrad back then, in the middle of January, instead of like Puerto Rico or somewhere like more Spanish. But that was amazing. So the department absolutely took me in. So Russian major. Fast forward a couple of years, and it is the post-Soviet era. So at first I thought I wanted to be a business person in the Russia sphere, because this was the 90s. It was the go-go 90s. It was shock therapy. So I got my master's in international relations, Russian is European Central Asian Studies, at University of Washington's Jackson School for International Studies. But next thing you know, I met the Slavic department there, So one day the department chair is chatting with me and he looks at me and says, "Why aren't you applying for a doctorate?" And I was like, "I can do that." So there you go. So that kind of led the trail. And my father and my mother actually are both teachers also. My father taught English, actually. His retirement job was teaching English as a second language at an adult high school in New Jersey. So language teaching has always been important in my family. And being able to teach Russian, particularly within the context of a historically Black university in a field that is known for its somewhat homogeneous whiteness, has been awesome. So kind of it hit the intellectual mark, it hit the professional development interest global travel mark, and yeah, it's paying for my health insurance and retirement. So what's not to love? God loves the Trinity.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It's so interesting how, something like that as a high school class could really kind of be so transformative in your career path going forward. So that's excellent. Yeah, thank you for sharing.
Oh, and I totally forgot also to mention, I got a foreign language area studies grant for summer 1996 to go to St. Petersburg. So sorry, had to do the double check mark on that one too.
Perfect. That's great. That's great. Thank you for that. Kramer, the same question to you.
Sure. Yeah, I definitely didn't seek out the languages that I chose because they were less commonly taught. That's just sort of an interesting fact about them. I sought them out because they were the obvious language choices for me because I knew I was interested in Tajikistan and Afghanistan. And in fact, I didn't study Dari or Tajik until after I had already moved to Tajikistan. So for me, it was kind of like when you get up in the morning and decide what to put on, you don't say, what's the most common weather out in the world? You say, what is the weather right outside my door? And so for me, it was, there was the languages that I needed at the time and the languages that I thought that I would need in the future. And indeed, I have used them a ton. They've been my knowledge of these Persian languages has kind of been very defining for how my life has gone. And so I've needed them for living in Tajikistan, just daily tasks, on and off since 2009. When I traveled to Afghanistan, used them there. Certainly, I did my master's research all on Afghanistan and used my language skills a lot there. And then my dissertation research in Tajikistan, which was based on interviews, surveys, going through, old newspapers and libraries. And so all that stuff just would have been completely impossible without these language skills. And now, day to day, I use it mostly to talk on WhatsApp with my friends in Tajikistan. So I should probably be doing more academic work in Tajik, but right now it's more WhatsApp. Yeah, so that's it.
That's great. WhatsApp or academic work, extremely useful regardless. We're going to move on to Asma. The same question to you. So again, the question is, why did you choose to study a less commonly taught language? And then how did that experience help support your research and or your future career?
Yeah, of course. I think a lot of people are led to study Japanese because of growing up watching anime, or maybe they've been exposed to manga at a young age. But for me, that was definitely not the case. I wasn't exposed to sort of any form of Japanese culture growing up. What really led me to study Japanese was the fact that there was sort of a middle school that offered Japanese courses that both of my elder siblings had gone through and graduated from, and they talked about how fun of a program it was. And I think that's what initially led me to apply to the program and then pursue it for so long. And I think language learning is really important at a very young age, especially when you're in middle school. Language learning the environment has to be made comfortable for a student to really be able to gain sort of an interest in it. And for me, my Japanese teachers were also kind and forgiving whenever we would make mistakes or we wouldn't understand a concept. Our teachers would be so kind as to sort of provide us with coach classes to help us after school to understand the lessons better. And I think noticing how kind these professors, these teachers were, and how interesting the language was, I decided that I wanted to pursue this passion even further. And I remember after graduating from middle school that there was a program offered at my at a local high school for students who graduated from my specific middle school. So, I chose to take that route, and I continued taking Japanese classes in high school. And I actually, out of high school, I couldn't afford to go to a four-year university after graduating. So I made the decision to attend a community college. And unfortunately, there weren't any Japanese lessons offered at the advanced level, which I had sort of reached when I graduated from high school. I took the advanced placement exam. I got a 4 on it. And so I was eligible to take advanced courses, but unfortunately they weren't offered at my community college. So I took the initiative to look for external opportunities outside of my community college. And I remember there were Japanese classes offered at a local university that where sort of I know there was, if I recall correctly, there was like an inter-university or inter-college sort of exchange going on where students from the community college I was attending could also take classes at the local university. So I was able to take advanced Japanese classes there. And then, 2 years later, I transferred to Johns Hopkins University. And, I noticed that it was a huge jump in terms of language education as well. It was a kind of a rude awakening because I'd studied Japanese for so long when I transferred, but I realized that I still had a long ways to go. So, after having studied Japanese for so long, I decided that I wanted to pursue sort of an academic interest. I wanted to about Japan and about Japanese culture because of how interesting it was and how different and how very little I was exposed to it at a young age. So I would always seek opportunities to immerse myself in any form of Japanese culture, both in and outside of university. And I've studied the Japanese language for almost half my life. And to an extent, I consider myself Japanese, especially after having gone to Japan between my junior and senior year of university. So it's definitely a huge part of my life. And, I've never been passionate about anything other than Japan, really. And that sort of led me to even, select international relations as my major in university because of how passionate I was about East Asia. And it definitely, in terms of professional interest, I'm interested in, attending graduate school in Japan and also working in Japan and gaining fluency in the language as well. So yeah, Japanese is definitely a part of my everyday life. I'm currently also taking a class. I'm auditing a course at Johns Hopkins SAIS. I'm taking a course called Post Proficiency Japanese. And the more that I delve into Japanese politics and, Japan-US relations, I realize it's something that I really I want to study even further at the graduate level. So that's sort of what I have planned for right now. I'm sorry, I kind of got carried away.
That's perfect. No, that is perfect. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's really interesting and insightful to kind of get a little glimpse into all of your journeys, studying a less commonly taught language. Yeah, so thank you for these very insightful answers. For our third question, to you, starting with Marilis, how did your experience in the program enhance skills other than language skills, such as global or cultural literacy?
Well, I do have to say, I was the old woman in my group, last summer, right? So basically, one of the main reasons why I was able to take part in the program was because it was distance. As a faculty member, I have summer responsibilities at the university. And on the other side, we don't sign up to be monks. So I have family responsibilities too. So turning to the husband and saying, I'm going to Russia for 8 weeks to study intensively in the summer. Here are the keys. Bye. that just like not happening, right? But distance met a lot of the needs that I had, particularly because it was live interaction with the faculty in Russia, right? And the program did an amazing job at connecting us with faculty and other students in sort of the two capitals, Moscow and St. Petersburg, and really updated what Russia was, right? There has been such amazing change. If you love history, try Russian history. Like there's nothing like the level of seismic change. So what was important for me was, okay, what is it looking like now compared to when I started back in the Reagan era, compared to when I did my graduate studies in the 90s. So just from the point of view of culture, it was very important. One of the major classes we had was actually contemporary Russian structures. So I finally figured out how the bicameral Russian system works, which is really arcane. And if you're into political science, do that because it's awesome. But definitely just what is Russia now? What is the language now? What do they like to see now? That was really important, particularly also as the instructor of record. I teach pretty much all the Russia stuff at Howard. I finally have a teaching assistant and she teaches languages, but I help to mentor the history and political science students, and particularly with sort of the rep that Russia gets, particularly when you talk about like election tampering and all that. It's important to be able to have that real life connection to the place, to be able to help students figure out sources, figure out what their study is. So for me, it was very important that getting to the now, what is it like now? What are the young people saying now? What are the structures now? So that was, so professionally, it was really important for me to do that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for that. We're going to go to Kramer. Same question to you.
Yeah, so when I started this Fulbright-Hayes stint, I had just spent 13 months living in Tajikistan already. So it wasn't a new context for me as far as where I was living. But what the program did was it linked me with American Councils for International Education Language Center. And so I was able to start formal language classes. And one thing that did, totally aside from the language learning component, was that it showed me firsthand what kind of post-Soviet style, Soviet era pedagogy was like. It was really interesting to take classes from the Tajikistani citizens who learned how to teach during the Soviet Union, and just to be in that class rather than just learning about you hear caricatures about Soviet era pedagogy from a lot of people, but to actually get to experience it was really useful for me. And it actually made me reflect on kind of some of the pedagogy that we have in the US, which puts kind of talks about, we should only think about critical thinking and not about facts and knowledge, which I think I was totally on board with, but then it's a little bit almost the opposite with the instructors I had from who were trained in the Soviet system. And you start to see the value of memorizing facts when paired with critical thinking too. But also just understanding that the way people were taught and the way people process knowledge really helped me understand all the people who I ran into throughout my life in Tajikistan, and made me also better understand how I could conduct interviews for my own research, and how kind of people processed information and what types of questions would make more sense to people and how to phrase things. So for me, it was the cultural experience of the classroom outside of simply the language learning component that was really interesting to me.
Absolutely, absolutely. Great, thank you for that. Asma, same question to you.
Yeah, I think for me, less from like an academic point of view, for me, just understanding as someone who's identified as, who considers herself a cultural ambassador, understanding that I am sort of just one language learner in sort of this vast world, and how in Japan, identifying as a South Asian, as a Muslim, and as an American are all three very different things that I and I also had to, while in Japan, because I was sort of one of the first interactions that sort of my Japanese host family had. I don't know if I said this before, but when I was in Japan, I lived with a host family. I was sort of their first interaction with a Pakistani American Muslim. I had to sort of carry myself with certain dignity and certain respect, because when I would tell others that I was of three different backgrounds, and that I identified myself with each, that I'd have to respond, sort of answer their questions in a sense, and sort of consider myself a leader, and someone that they could pose questions to, as someone that identifies as all those three backgrounds. So not beyond just the language skills, also in terms of character building. That's something that I really learned being abroad. And I guess I can talk about academics in a sense. I haven't really formally researched Japan, or sort of. I'm currently studying Japanese government, but I haven't done any formal research on Japan. But I've been passionate about Japan and the Japanese language for such a long time, but I was struck by how few opportunities there are for foreigners to actually move to the country, and how many barriers of entry there are for foreigners who are interested in Japan to actually work and live in Japan, even though that's currently my goal. So having to also reconcile with those thoughts, and understand that you can be so passionate about a country, but there still will be some there will be some barriers as a foreigner. That's something that I'm still struggling to grapple with, and understanding that Japan has a very unique culture, that's traditionally been quite closed off. So it's growing up, I had this flowery perception of what Japan was like, but actually delving deep into the culture, I understand that it has this very unique history that that has current repercussions on Japan, and sort of their perceptions a lot of Japanese elderly. So that's something that I had to respect, and I had to understand traveling to Japan, and also again carrying myself with a certain level of respect and dignity, because of certain misconceptions about my background as well. So that was definitely hard to really reconcile with when I first traveled to Japan, but something I gradually overcame, and am still sort of working on overcoming.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Yeah, I think a lot of what you mentioned will resonate with a lot of our viewers today, regarding kind of grappling one's own identity when going abroad and learning a new language and things like that. So yeah. Thank you. Moving on to our next question. What recommendations or advice would you give to individuals considering applying to language programs or trying to learn a new language? And Amarilis, we'll start off with you.
In a way, that's kind of not a fair question, because as a Puerto Rican, bilingualism is the key to upward mobility for the most part, right? As part of the United States, if you can't deal with the English, you can't really deal with the greater federal structures. My father actually started this whole language thing. He grew up in the small southern town without running water or electricity. So he went to the military, and what he did was he spent a couple of years in Germany. And this was before he went to college. And so now we have this collection of 1950s records, and it's like the greatest mix. Like half of it is European opera, and half of it is Latin American boleros, because he got this passion for European opera while he was there. So he came back and he was an English teacher. He started as an English teacher, then he worked in business till he retired, and then he retired to be an English teacher again. So one, multilingualism is really key if you want to operate at the global level. So that's one. Now, the question is, why pick a less commonly taught language as opposed to something, say, like Spanish or French? Therein is the real question, right? Because, sorry, I'm the academic, right? And the Chronicle of Higher Education in 2019 published an article that showed a study that between 2013 and 2016, the US lost 651 language programs, right? So it is even more urgent now to learn languages that are less commonly taught languages, not just for the beauty of it, not just for the poetry, but also just sort of, sorry, I'm the Russianist, right? I get paid to be slightly paranoid, just national security wise. If you want to understand a lot of what's going on in Europe, Russia has major networks with Africa, with Latin America. Right now, a big deal is Nord Stream 2, which is going to create, major alternative fuel pipelines in sort of that northern European region towards Germany. So the question is, LCTLs are more vital than ever. And as I teach at a historically Black university and my children go to public school, we also need more folk to diversify our perspectives, right? I would really, really hate that part of my legacy is looking at a world where to study Russian, you would only be able to do it at a place like Harvard, Yale, or Princeton. It should be accessible. Looking at Asma, right? And her example, it would really be so enriching if our students in high school could all access at least 2 less commonly taught languages, be it Japanese, Arabic, Chinese, Russian, close to my heart, of course. But from the point of view of just even equity and diversifying our stock of experts, that would be just amazing and transformative. And the ripple effect across different aspects of our society would be amazing.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for that. Kramer, we're going to go to you for the same question.
Okay, maybe a couple pieces of advice for people once they've started studying, not when they're applying. And so one is, at least for me, sometimes it was embarrassing, especially at first, to be speaking a language poorly with people who I knew could speak English pretty well. And so try your best to put yourself in situations where the language that you're just starting to learn is the absolute best way you could be communicating with whoever else is in that situation. So that rather than feeling guilty about how little you know at this point, you're feeling proud that you're able to make any connection at all with the little bit that you've learned thus far. And then also, and I think this is especially true if you're learning a less commonly taught language, realize that you are learning a specific version of that language. And maybe it's that there's an official textbook version, or with a lot of languages, including Tajik sometimes, depending on what textbook you get, you're learning a different version that has some kind of specific regional inflections. So, I mean, it's good to not confuse yourself and just start off with one version at a time, but ask your instructors if there are other variations because of either class differences, ethnic differences, or regional differences. And then also find out why the one that you're learning is the one that you're learning, and why different versions of a language might be politicized and some dominant over others. And then as you move farther along in the language, try to actually be able to master some of those differences between, different regional dialects or dialects between different groups within whatever language area you're focusing on.
Great, thank you for that. Asma, we'll move to you with the same question.
Yeah, for the organization that I'm working for currently actually is uh, well, I'll talk about this later, but there are so many organizations that are looking for students to and sort of encouraging students to travel abroad and want to give this the study abroad experiences to academics like yourself. The again, I was saying this earlier, but the organization that I'm working for currently actually is actively looking for college students who possess an interest in Japanese and wants to give them money to for them to be able to travel abroad. And that's an example of one organization, but there are so many others that I came across in my own research when I was trying to travel abroad to Japan that were looking for specifically college students. And actually high school students as well, to take them to Japan and give them the experience of a lifetime. So you really just have to go out of your way to search for these programs, and they do exist. And if you connect to your study abroad office on your campus, they're a great resource for you. And definitely make connections with the study abroad advisors, because whenever they find are told of an opportunity, they'll send it your way. That's something that that was a connection that I made sure to build on my campus. I still actually keep in touch with my study abroad advisor from Hopkins, and she often tells me of opportunities, related to Japan. And so I'm really grateful for her to do that. So, I recommend that to every student. Also, as someone who studied Japanese for so long, for almost, 10 years, I can say that language learning, it's best when it's taken slowly, trying to speed up the process and, force yourself to understand certain concepts in such a short amount of time. In the long run won't help you. You won't be able to retain that information as effectively. So definitely trying to, being patient with yourself and being forgiving of the fact that you will make mistakes and, you know, also, creating an immersive environment for yourself in the home is really important. So outside of the class, you're also getting exposure. So oftentimes, what I do is, a lot of the books that I read currently for just during my leisure time are all in Japanese. I watch a lot of Japanese dramas. I listen to a lot of Japanese music. Um, so doing stuff like that definitely helps. And if you take the initiative to find opportunities outside as well, so that also helps. So something that I did was, outside of after I graduated from Hopkins, for a period of time I wasn't taking, because I wasn't a student, I wasn't taking any Japanese class, and I I really felt like I had lost something major in my life. And I connected with, I basically networked with a lot of people with my professors from Hopkins who told me about the program being offered at Johns Hopkins Science at the graduate school in DC. And, I was told of this opportunity to take this class at that institution, and so I'm currently auditing it. I was able to register, and now I'm taking this class that gives me the fulfillment that I've always had when taking Japanese courses, and that really I think it's just a testament to the fact that taking an initiative is the most important step in language education.
Great, thank you for that. That advice from all of you all was wonderful. It's great to kind of hear that micro and technical advice, but also the broader insight on the importance of learning a less commonly taught language. So thank you to everyone for that question. I have one more question for you all before I open it up to our participants for a Q&A. This is kind of more of a question on the fun side of things. But what was your biggest takeaway from participating in the program? This can also be what your favorite memory was. And so, Amarilis, we'll start with you.
Well, Russia is a lot more fun than it was when I was young. This is definitely a case where I can say sort of progress has definitely sped up things over there. Back when I first went, it was the Soviet period, and everything was sort of generic, unmarked, and definitely more sort of on the gray side of the color. And now it is just amazing how much it has just gotten more colorful, just more. And that was fantastic, particularly when it came to finding out about modern music. That was my favorite part, learning about contemporary music, like the greatest hits of the now, which is kind of funny because, I do have to say that looking at my tastes, sort of given no control in English and Spanish, um, I'm more into the cheesy pop kind of range. Just finding out, and also how much more accessible Russian media is with modern technology. Uh, YouTube has revolutionized our access to contemporary information, contemporary music, contemporary movies, ORT, TV1. Basically, you can watch all their stuff on YouTube, and that is fantastic. You can actually stay up to date so much more easily. And just meeting the younger students also was great, just getting their perspective, particularly when it came to the digital side, because we were a distance program. And I have to say that was probably the most important takeaway, how this technological leap is going to change how we do this language learning and connecting with advanced training abroad was really amazing, particularly because I was taking it because I had to teach in the fall. So I was that every morning it was like my technical note for the day so that I don't make this mistake, right? But it wasn't no mistakes. It was all like, and you can do this and you can do that. So definitely kudos to the team that managed this, because I myself learned so much that I'm putting into use in my class now. And that was probably the most important one for me.
Great, thank you for that. Yeah, it's great to hear that kind of like multi-generational perspective that you have, and how the increasing significance of technology is influencing these programs. So yeah, great to hear. Thank you. Kramer, we're going to move the same question to you.
Yeah, I guess a big takeaway for me, and I guess this is additional advice if anyone's doing a language program, is to really spend your time focusing on building relationships with the people who you come into contact with in whatever country you might go to. And I think those relationships pay the biggest dividends of anything else that you do. I don't suggest like sociopathically viewing relationships as things for you to benefit from. But even if you were thinking of like, I want to learn the most, or, improve my language the most, or, relationships are the ways they unlock all those doors for you. And so if you form real legitimate friendships with people, you're going to be talking all the time, using all sorts of vocabulary that won't be in your lessons. You're going to get invited to do activities that's going to, help with your cultural literacy, but also help you fall in love with the country. And then maintaining those connections is going to help you keep all of this up, even when you're no longer a student and don't have opportunities to practice. Like I was saying with my WhatsApp and everything, it keeps you on top of what the news is, local news that's not getting published maybe in the media sources. And then for me, it also keeps me coming back. I keep wanting to go back to Tajikistan, almost like visiting, aunts, uncles, or grandparents. I feel obligated to go. Like, it's been too long since I've seen these people. I need to go. And then when I go, I, have people to stay with. I have a full schedule just from hanging out with people. And so, yeah, I would say, sure, there's going to be language learning happening, but focus on building relationships, and focus on building relationships not with the other students, because that just turns cliquish and weird. Focus on forming relationships with people in the country that you're visiting.
Great, thank you for that. Yeah, it's great to hear your kind of take on the importance of that just kind of human connection and that mutually beneficial relationship. So yeah, thank you for that. Asma, we're gonna go same question to you.
Yeah, I'm gonna second what sort of the earlier panelist said. I think learning a language gives you, or learning sort of a language that's not often that's not often spoken gives you access to a whole new community that you would have never had you not studied the language. So when I went to Japan, and actually even before then, I'd been cultivating community slowly but surely by engaging with my Japanese teachers and professors and talking to sort of my peers as well. And then when going to Japan, I was able to connect with my homestay family. And, I took the initiative to speak with them entirely in Japanese. And even though they had some knowledge of English, because I wanted to sort of improve my Japanese speaking skills, I had forced myself to restrict myself to only speaking Japanese. And so that, allowed me to make connections with my host mother. My host mother trusted me really early on in our relationship, which was honestly amazing because she connected me with people in her own community and some of her closest friends. So I would often go out and eat dinner with her friends, families, and I would also go to sort of attend this weekly language club that my host mother would often sort of moderate. And at times I would also be asked to moderate. And it was because I tried to make myself seem as enthusiastic about Japan and Japanese culture as much as possible. And, I made sure to showcase the fact that I was also still learning the language, and I was also willing to sort of educate others about American culture and respond to any of their inquiries. So that's something that definitely helped me build community in Japan as well. And then again, like I've sort of been saying a lot, is taking steps to sort of get outside of your comfort zone and find and look for opportunities to immerse yourself more in the language and culture. That's something that I did sort of at the institution I was attending. There were a number of events that were offered to students that were attending that in different parts of Japan, sort of close to the Yokohama area. Sort of in the Tokyo area, kind of on the outskirts, that would happen, that I would attend. And, those opportunities were also great for networking as well. And I networked with not only people my own age, but people, who are also pursuing graduate education in Japan and their PhDs as well. And I still communicate with those people today in helping me sort of with my own career path, because I'm very much a student right now and I'm still sort of trying to figure out what it is that I want to do. But definitely being able to access this new community was something that I was so grateful to be able to do. And so I, recommend that to any other person studying, not just a language that's not really commonly taught, but any language, really, trying to find people who will boost you as you're learning this language and who will connect you with others. That's very important.
Great, thank you so much. So this is going to conclude this section of our panel. So again, I want to thank our panelists for all of their thoughtful contributions today. I'm now going to open up the floor for questions from our audience. So again, audience members, please use the raise hand function if you have a question. Okay, it looks like we have a question from Carolyn. You can go ahead and unmute.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much to our panelists. I loved hearing about each one of your individual experiences. And what I love about it is the different paths that, that people can take along their language learning journey and wind up in different places, but still have a common experience. I would be curious if any of you have had, I guess, use for your less commonly taught language skills here in the US, Obviously, there are applications when you travel abroad and are making, contacts in the country abroad, but have there been any unexpected opportunities here in the US to use your Russian or Tajik or Japanese language skills?
Okay, I'll start with like the mommy moment, right? So who would think that Russian would be essential to being a mom? Well, it was because I live in Silver Spring, which is a really sort of diverse area, and sort of across the street, 3 doors down, is our piano teacher, who is, now this is totally Soviet, Russian nationality, Ukrainian, former children's music composer from Ukraine. Okay, which means she's really good. And basically, we only speak in Russian. So, that's like the sort of unexpected Russian moment when I get to use Russian to negotiate, the quality of my children's piano lessons. So that's sort of the fun part too, because it's totally like, it's not politics. It's about, what is music? What kind of music will the children learn? And what does music do to us writ large? And that's just kind of cool.
Thanks.
I have some friends who work with refugee resettlement, and some of them who don't speak Persian have called me and said, we just got a call 15 minutes ago that someone arrived at the airport and we had to go meet them, and so then I ended up kind of serving as a translator. Like, they didn't have time to find a translator. They had to just run to the airport and then just had me on the phone asking me questions. The person even had some forms they had to sign, and I needed to explain as best I could without seeing the forms myself what it was they were signing. So that was something. I mean, I guess I was called, so I could have been anywhere in the world, but it was something that happened in the U.S. And then I have been in places also where there were some Tajik classes. University of Wisconsin-Madison has summer Tajik, and so I've been able to go in and be like a guest speaker there and give some presentations and stuff.
That's great.
Yeah, I can't say that I've had sort of an experience like that. This is my first time actually being invited as a panelist. I've always considered myself a student and someone who's still learning Japanese, so I've never been sort of in a position where I can give advice to someone because of the fact that I'm still sort of trying to understand the ropes. But not too long ago, I sort of was sort of invited to, or not necessarily invited, but a colleague of mine had told me about a language club that occurs bi-weekly, a Japanese language club where there's, in addition to myself, there's a native Japanese speaker and 3 other students who are currently learning Japanese and are at the basic level, trying to sort of work their way up. And I was sort of, because of the 10 years of Japanese that I have under my belt, a lot of these students sort of look to me to provide them with advice and suggestions on how they could learn Japanese. And they were kind of amazed at how well I spoke Japanese. I guess it's very difficult for me to sort of say that I'm a lot of people consider me to be fluent, but I definitely feel like I have a long ways to go before I get to that level. But sort of being in a new position like that was definitely something that it came unexpectedly. And when these students inquired about how I've been able to study the Japanese language for so long, being able to really reflect on sort of the opportunities that I was able to, I had the privilege of having, was something that, was definitely very fulfilling for me. And when, at times when the native speaker of Japanese, who sort of is considered the teacher in our language club, is unable to explain a concept, properly, or not properly, but I guess when she has trouble communicating what it is that she wants to say, I often intercede for her, and she appreciates the fact that I do so. And so those are some occasions, or some sort of events that have sort of happened during this language club that happens biweekly. But yeah, nothing too major.
Well, thank you so much.
Great, thank you. It looks like we have a question from Tim Duval. Tim, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you. I have sort of a specific question for one of the panelists, and that's Kramer. First, I have to comment on the world-class mustache. Extremely impressive. But I think you made an excellent point when you said that it's important to understand that when you learn a language, you're actually learning a version of that language. When I studied Italian as an undergrad, I thought I knew Italian, and then I spoke to a Sicilian, and I realized I didn't really know Italian, or at least I didn't know that version. But along those lines, I want to go back to something you said in your opening statement. You said that some view Dari and Tajik as distinct languages, while others view them as Persian dialects. And I'm wondering if you can give us a quick tutorial on the two schools of thought.
Sure. It's not a unique situation for there to be a dispute over whether something is a dialect or a language. There's the old quote, I think, originally in reference to Yiddish, saying that language is a dialect with an army and a navy. And I think, so Farsi in Iran, Dari in Afghanistan, and Tajik in Tajikistan are three versions of Persian that are more or less mutually intelligible. No matter what I say, there's going to be all sorts of flack for anything. But there are some differences in grammar. There are definite differences in pronunciation, and definite differences in certain vocabularies. And then within each country, there's a lot of variation too. But I think because of the Soviet history, Tajik is written in the Cyrillic alphabet. So it looks drastically different from Dari and Farsi, which are written in the Perso-Arabic script. And so because of that, I think Tajik is more often considered to be its own language. And then when people speak in Tajikistan, oftentimes they'll throw a lot of Russian words into their speech. And so I think there's a misconception that that official Tajik language also has a lot of Russian loanwords in it, and it has some, but not as much as you would actually hear. And then, Dari has more loanwords from Pashto or Urdu and English, actually, too. And then Farsi has more loanwords from France. Farsi has way more Arabic in it than Tajik does. Tajik has a lot more Old Persian. So anyway, I think because there are discernible differences, and especially because there are some different alphabets, people will make the argument that they're different languages. But I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that there are these three countries that you can tie it to. When it comes to conversation, it's not necessarily seamless, but it's pretty close. And so that's the dialect argument.
Thank you for that.
Great, thank you. So it looks like we have time for one more question. So Ashley, it looks like you have a question. You can go ahead and ask.
Hi, everyone. It was really great to hear from all of you. I kind of wanted to follow up on an earlier point about diversifying people who are able to study these languages. I'm curious, how did each of you hear about the opportunities that you had, like the group projects abroad or the FLAS programs? So how did you hear about them? And do you have any recommendations for being able to kind of get the word out about these opportunities to students from either underserved backgrounds or, like people who usually wouldn't necessarily have these opportunities?
I can talk briefly. So I think I first heard about the FLAS from on campus. I was talking to a bunch of my colleagues in my Japanese classes, and I remember there was this one of my colleagues in particular had basically gotten a lot of the scholarships and fellowships that are out there for Japanese language learning. So he had gotten the Freeman scholarship. He had the Gilman, and he'd also gotten FLAS previously as well, and a host of others. And I remember him talking specifically about how I would be a perfect candidate for FLAS. And I was also at the time considering, I was very interested in the idea of study abroad. So I made sure to also take into consideration the FLAS when I was applying to multiple Japan study abroad programs. And so that's how I heard about it. And I was really grateful to have received it. And for that reason, you know, I'm someone who comes from quite an underprivileged background. I could never really afford to travel on my own or with my own expenses growing up. So being able to receive the class was for study abroad was absolutely revolutionary for me. And yeah, I heard about it in class, and I was really grateful to have received it.
I'll just really quickly say for the group projects abroad, I was connected to that after I contacted the language center where I took the classes. So they coordinated everything and then just said, hey, do you want in on this? And then for the FLAS, it was all through the regional centers at my university. So the Center for South Asia, and then also the Center for Russia, Eastern Europe, and Central Asia.
Okay, so for that to happen, there has to be one person that cares. I'm that person at Howard. I have a team that helps me a lot. The Bunch Center for International Studies is our study abroad center. And we actually now house the Gilman, the Payne, and the Rangel fellowships. The Rangel helps provide funding if you want a career in the State Department. Not that I'm looking at asthma, but I'm looking at asthma. Check out the Rangel, right? The Payne is targeted for a master's, and it channels you into a job with USAID. And we also get Boren's and Gilman's. Anytime I go to a conference, I hit all those tables and I ask, okay, what programs are coming up? Thankfully, people from places like Jessica's department come visit my campus and they tell me what they have coming up too. So there is a network of very dedicated, passionate people, and there's a lot more money than there used to be. So the other thing that we also do is we think up new ways to do what I call horizontal outreach. Asthma probably will be the first one to tell you that getting past that first year hump in something like Japanese or Russian is probably the most challenging thing you will do, especially if you don't look like everybody else in the classroom.
Definitely.
So I am working with the U.S. Russia Foundation. They gave me a grant. So we are running a nationwide mentorship program dedicated for undergraduates. And we have faculty members from across the country that will help them do little research projects dedicated to Russia. So it could be Russian history, Russian literature. They'll do digital humanities projects. And the reason why I call it horizontal is that I don't have a language limit on it. Like, if you don't have Russian, if you're thinking that maybe you want to try Russian and go do that, apply, right? The important thing is just show up. And that's sort of, I want to put that on my door. Just show up. The first most important thing is to just show up. And then now we have our list. Like, we have Chris Miller from American Councils, right? Okay, so we're going to ask him to come and talk, right? Who are we going to ask to come and talk? Okay, the State Department, we know a person there, they'll come talk too. So there's a lot more money, there's a lot more programs, and there's a network. So equity-wise, what is more important now really is more sort of, I hate to say this, the ground PTA level, that parents understand that there's a value in something more than just Spanish in their high schools, and that they hit their state legislatures and their local school boards, who are in the end the ones that really hold the keys to truly diversifying the field. It's a major investment for state and local public institutions to invest in this. And unless they have people like me when I wear my mommy PTA hat, advocating for something more than Spanish in the local high school. That makes a huge difference. So, like I said, it's a long network. It's a network answer, really.
Well, thank you so much for all of this. This is going to conclude our language learning showcase. I really can't thank our panelists enough for all of your wonderful and insightful conversations today. For more information on the Fulbright-Hayes Group Projects Abroad program and the Foreign Language and Area Studies program, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Twitter at GoGlobalEd. For more information specifically on the Fulbright-Hayes Group Projects Abroad program, you can contact GPA at ed.gov. And for more information on the Foreign Language and Area Studies program, contact IFLE at ed.gov. Thank you, everyone, and be well.
Thank you.